And it is Indiana in the Morning, presented by First Commonwealth Bank. It's the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, AM 1160 and 101.1 FM. Coming up on Monday night, Senior Supervisory Special Agent Alan McGill of the Pennsylvania State Attorney General's Office is going to be here at IUP, and he's going to be in Johnson Hall from 5 to 6 p.m. talking about drug abuse from a healthcare perspective, and he joins us on the telephone this morning. Alan, good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you with us here today. The program coming up on Monday, I know that you are speaking to groups all the time, speaking to a senior group just the other day. I know you've spoken to school groups and college audiences. Does the program have to change depending upon topic when you talk to different groups such as this?
Well, it does. It depends on which group I'm speaking to. Generally, what I do is I spent the last 30 years as an investigator, and then I spent a considerable amount of time in narcotics, over 20 years. So I developed these training programs for hospitals and nurses, and then I branched that out to reach the universities as well. So any of the practitioner programs such as nursing or pharmacy or physicians, prescribers, those sort of groups. And so I just tailor them just a little bit to kind of give them the information they need based on their particular discipline. And this group, and sometimes I do them for, individuals, just, public groups, which is a little bit different. It's not quite as technical. This is more geared towards the nursing department, the pharmacies, and those sort of things.
Mm-hmm. So when you talk to this group at IUP come Monday, the topic is going to be drug abuse from a healthcare perspective. How does that differ from, say, a teacher's perspective, an educator's perspective?
Well, this is designed more for what the nurses are probably going to encounter in the setting. So they're going to get a little bit about what colleagues and other practitioners' experiences regarding diversion of medications from the facility, and it's also going to it's going to be a little bit of a blend where we'll talk a little bit about individuals that suffer from substance use disorder from a patient perspective, but it's geared towards the practitioner being able to identify it, not only in the general public, but also really with their colleagues. And it's just a little bit different because the practitioners, while most folks really in the past several years started with a prescription drug, which is what kind of sparked their addiction, they wind up stealing medications away from a facility, mostly because they have access to it. And the different ways that they do it and the clever ways that they hide it, that's what this is designed to do, is to give those practitioners a way to identify that so that they can deal with it from an internal perspective, so that we can stop folks stealing medications away from our loved ones when they're in a facility.
From within your particular purview at the State Attorney General's office, we watch the numbers for the opioid crisis as it began several years ago, and improving numbers here, maybe numbers that are deteriorating or not improving elsewhere. And it's not that we're ever going to long for the opioid crisis when it was just the opioid crisis, but it's more dangerous now than ever because of the mixing of drugs, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. Unfortunately now, and I don't usually say opioid crisis that much anymore, I steer away from it because it's really just a drug epidemic. Mm-hmm. We are seeing a huge rise in cocaine and stimulant use, such as methamphetamine, those sort of things. And then, of course, you've got all the tainted drugs, which includes some of the fake pharmaceuticals that are being produced and sold on the streets. You have fentanyl being mixed into just about everything. We have colleagues, of course, in Florida law enforcement talking about discovering fentanyl in large quantities in marijuana that's laced with fentanyl. They're putting fentanyl in dabs, which is the honey oil or beeswax. It's THC concentration created from some of the leftover materials in marijuana production. There is medications where they put fentanyl, of course, and create them to look like pills that you would expect to be pharmaceutical grade. And they're so good that they actually look exactly like you really can't tell the difference between a fake Vicodin and a real Vicodin pill. And so I talk about some of this with this program as well, so that folks can see what it looks like, have an idea. Because the real danger, of course, is if someone becomes addicted to a pharmaceutical, and when they no longer have access to industrial or pharmaceutical-grade medications, they'll often seek out other sources. And those other sources may be fake medications, which can cause death or injury, or they might go to illicits because of cost. If you take, for example, a 30 milligram oxycodone tablet, which is commonly been faked now and sold on the streets. If you just take that tablet there and you add fentanyl into that, if someone becomes addicted to those tablets, they're going to seek those tablets out, and they're going to try and buy them on the street first, usually. And after that becomes cost prohibitive, because it's usually about $1 a milligram is what they're paying for these pills. Sometimes a little bit less. You can get it a bulk rate. But if you take it $1 a milligram, you're talking $30 a tablet. They can buy a bag of heroin for $3 or $4, and it's going to wind up being the same effect. So there's really no math in that. It doesn't take long for someone to figure out it can't afford. And it depends on how their addiction is. I've had nurses and I've had pharmacists that were so addicted to either Vicodin or oxycodone where they were taking anywhere from 20 to 40 pain pills a day. I have two cases like that where I arrested two practitioners, and that's what they were doing. And of course, my fear is when you're addicted to the substances in that quantities, if you go to the street to buy them and you get a fake medication or a counterfeit medication, and it's mixed in with fentanyl, that's why people wind up overdosing.
We're talking to Alan McGill, Senior Supervisory Special Agent with the State Attorney General's Office. Help me to understand this, because I think a lot of people would be in my boat. They would say a drug dealer certainly is not going to sell you something that is going to kill you, because then that drug dealer loses a customer. They don't really look at it that way, do they?
No, and actually there have been cases where law enforcement believes, of course, that they will actually load up fentanyl into pills, maybe not all of them, but a couple of them. And it's not necessarily, they don't want to obviously injure or kill their clientele, because they need those individuals to make purchases. But what they will do is they will make the load sometime heavy so they can actually cause an overdose. Because what happens is when an overdose occurs, whether it's heroin, whether it's pills, whatever you're selling, when that occurs, everyone that has substance use disorder automatically thinks that's where the strongest, most powerful, best drug is. So I'm going to go to that city or that block or that house to purchase because that's where I can get the absolute best stuff. Mm-hmm. And they will ignore that instinct that you or I would say is, that's a poisonous substance. It's going to harm me. I'm not going to go near it. And so the dealers all know this, and they will sometimes load those up. Sometimes it's because they're not very good at what they're doing. It's not like they're, in a, this isn't Mallinckrodt or Maersk where they're sitting there in a lab creating the chemicals and putting the right mixtures in there and doing it in a sanitary environment. These are occurring in basements and garages where they're creating these pills and they're putting in there what they think is going to be the best until they get the formulation right. That can cause injury too. Yeah. So they're just thinking about it in terms of money. This is just about making money for them. And as alarming as it is, their thought really isn't about whether it's injury. It's about how much can I make and how much can I sell. And so I'm going to load up all these different drugs that we're selling and try and make them the best possible, because that's their marketing tool. And that's a bad way to look at it, but that is exactly what they're thinking. That's how I market it out there, that my product's the best.
Couple of moments left here this morning with Alan McGill. He's going to be at IUP coming up on Monday, and he'll be talking to members of the health who are training for their future careers in the healthcare field. It's a healthcare perspective on drug abuse. In Indiana County this year, there has been, it's probably not the right word for it because it really is explosive. There's been an explosion of methamphetamine arrests and convictions. They seem to find them everywhere now, and it doesn't take a whole lot of expertise to make it happen. Talk about meth a little bit.
Well, methamphetamine, of course, another stimulant that's on the rise. Stimulants are sometimes follow opioid outbreaks, so that's not uncommon. Unfortunately, What's on the rise now are the red P or the red phosphorus labs or the super labs. So it's crystal. That's the purest form of meth, and the drug cartels are actually pushing this. They sometimes smuggle it across the border. They also will assemble the necessary ingredients and equipment here in the United States and create super labs here. Then they fan that out, and it's relatively cheap. Right now, it's not super expensive, and it does create a very intense high, and so it is very costly to a community. There's also something called the one-pot or shake-and-bake method, where individuals can manufacture their own methamphetamine. Doesn't take much for them to do it. The ingredients are easily sought, and they can do this. These are volatile. The red P labs, too, are volatile as well, so they can explode, they can catch fire, super dangerous, and folks are after this in waves. And this is across the country. It's not unique to Pennsylvania, but Pennsylvania is certainly not exempt either.
Yeah, we're finding a lot of one pot here in Indiana County. In fact, we just had a conviction this week of a guy who they were doing out of the trunk of the car. It's just amazing how ingenious, I guess is the word to use, ingenious some of the drug manufacturers and drug dealers can be, and obviously it's at a great cost to the general public and individuals within families. Adam, thank you so much for being with us this morning. This has been informative.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.